Hello my Star Citizen friends, welcome to a CitizenCon 2019 recap video. Today I'm going to take a look back at the keynote presentation and highlight some of the things that stood out to me. There were quite a few things that caught my eye. Let's go ahead and dive right in. The first little feature I noticed was equipping clothes without the mobi-glass. That is definitely needed in the game to save some time. After that, we saw some of the interior of the Karat, which still seems a bit barren on the inside. I'm hoping for a bit more final art to be slapped on before the ship releases. We also saw the 2-deck bridge, which is the first of its kind in the game. It'll be interesting to see how a full human crew can take advantage of it once multi-crew is implemented. After dilly-dallying about the bridge, we got to see more of the second deck on the Karat, before being introduced to the second ship reveal in this demo, the snug little anvil Pisces. A ship that honestly feels a bit like a rover, with wings and ship components added to it. It's perfectly sized to act as a small little shuttle, and proved this point by leaving the Karat's hangar before heading down to Microtech. A very cool shot that many, myself included, can't wait to experience for themselves. Oh, it's like the parents and kid enjoying the cold vacuum of space together. The Pisces made a short quantum jump around Microtech, giving us a great look at the exterior before showing up in low orbit at another feature I am very excited about, a space station in orbit. This is something we saw all the way back in 2016 at Gamescom and CitizenCon. It's something we saw in 2017 at CitizenCon, and it's something we've just really needed for a while. Less so with in-ship respawn working, but it is still very useful for the larger ships and trading gameplay. And I think we'll do a little bit to liven up the area a bit more with NPC traffic coming and going.
They will have hubs and basically other shops and all of that. So that will roll out with 3.8. So every planet, Lorville, ArtCorp, Microtech, and then obviously we have Port Alisar.
Yeah, this is Port Tresla, which is the orbital station around Microtech.
Then we got to take a look at the star of the show, Microtech, which looks great for an in-game asset, and is using the new Planetech V4, which we've seen at previous events has been long in the making, with various iterations and tools driving it forward. As Glenn flew the Pisces high over the planet's surface, you could see water droplets landing and scooching their way across the canopy, dynamically driven by the wind direction, which was pretty cool. You can also tell that the first and third person cameras ever so slightly do a better job of leaning and rocking with the roll of the ship to provide a smoother experience for the player. We could see the improved draw distances for the trees on land, which for a true asset was definitely an improvement on what we've seen previously, including what I perceive to have been a mock-up of Hurston in the 2017 presentation. New Babbage itself was looking great, which is expected as this is their third attempt at a landing zone. It looks much more city-like and less constrained, with areas to land all throughout the city on the ground, and no walls blocking land vehicles from coming and going. It also feels more genuine than the 2017 presentation did. Of course, Glenn takes the chance to fly through the residential building in the city where our habs are intended to reside. You know Glenn, always the show-off.
Glenn likes to show off. Glenn, you're just showing off now. Show off, Glenn. See if we can get through that. Fancy dancy. Woo-hoo.
True to form, Glenn. While flying through the city, we were informed that we will be able to choose which area we spawn into, which is another great touch and has been confirmed to being tested in 3.8 Evocati.
We will, not necessarily with 3.8, but we're going to start transitioning next year to towards having people start on the various planets versus start on Port Olisar, so you sort of will choose your home base.
Leaving the city behind, we got to see the spaceport, which is massive and built into the side of a mountain. It looks great. It also apparently has way more hangars and landing pads available than other spaceports. With each new landing zone, spaceports have been moving further and further away from the city proper, and it makes me wonder if they will eventually have small temporary hubs for the player who wants to land, but not necessarily visit the city. After landing, we got a look at the Microtech hangars, which appear to be a reskin of the older hangars and not what was planned for the new Babbage hangars, according to what was previously revealed. This most likely will be taken care of with the interior work being done next year, as the hangar interior designs looked much cleaner in the reveals than what we saw in the keynote. The spaceport interior itself gave us a nice look at the interior style of Microtech with big windows, clean Microtech style, and a hologram helper.
Hi.
You know,
Is there something I can help you with?
Cortina.
So this is our Cortina-like Microtech.
Yes,
The greeter.
Reader.
She's actually using the same model as the opera singer from the 890 Jump commercial.
I have a joke for you. Which standard Earth month has 28 days in it? All of them.
Yes.
Yep.
She appears to be a more finished model of what they attempted on R-Corp, and absolutely reminds me more of Avina, the virtual intelligence from the Mass Effect series.
Welcome to Presidium Tourism Terminal 1. There are many points of interest here.
The Pathfinder headquarters is located within the Operations Center. It will proudly collect the work.
Moving on with the mission, we got to see a quick look at the cloth tech, which I will touch on a little bit more later. And we got flown to a distant outpost by the AI, who actually flew the ship with us in it. This currently isn't a thing, and I hope it happens sooner than later, as this combined with server object container streaming means a more alive system and filthy NPC peasants can ferry me around. The outpost had a much more interesting style than what we currently see implemented, and is a positive sign of things to come.
We want to have points of interest that you would have in various planets or moons that you can have mission content in, things to do, and this is sort of this is a sort of first prototype of that.
Yeah, so we can have different entrances, different exits, different room layouts, different mission content associated with it. From there, then we start looking towards towns and villages.
The mention of villages reminds me of the elusive trash biome bar-like outpost we were meant to see in 3.3 that still hasn't made it into the game. Sad face. After the player departed the ship and stepped into the airlock, you can see the player status system in the bottom left-hand corner pick up the temperature change, which I feel might be a little inaccurate considering that room is still probably really cold, but we'll let it go. Once inside the outpost, we get our first look at the weather system with a blizzard outside, blowing snow, wind, and what looks like a tree blown by wind canned animation. Now, the meat of the mission takes place when the character has to attempt a pseudo-stealth mission to steal some data from a server. I say pseudo-stealth because 1, you're in disguise, so you don't really need to be all that stealthy for the most part, and 2, there probably isn't even a detection system running for the AI in this demo. Regardless, our player downloads the data onto the chip, and I can't help but wonder if at this point you would be able to sell this data to somebody else, or if you're locked into the mission objective. Selling the info to somebody else is reminiscent of the possibilities we've heard of in games like Cyberpunk 2077, and could open additional side quests, but we just don't know how deep the possibilities can go in an MMO, so we will have to wait and see, probably once data running is in the game. Now, after stealing the data, we used our disguise to mosey on around the base until we could find an exit.
You mind telling us what the hell's going on?
It was truly the pinnacle of an inconspicuous escape. At one point, the player is spotted and an alarm begins to blare, causing the player to panic in his escape. At this point, the player is forced to make their first non-lethal takedown we've seen thus far, flinging the NPC to the ground. We grab some more clothes before heading outside and get to look at some of the quote-unquote cold floor shader effects, which I hope are dynamic and not just baked in around the airlock. The player then slips outside into the blizzard, and it is immediately obvious he is not dressed for the weather. The player character is shivering, holding his hand up to his face, giving very obvious signs of discomfort. This is a great feedback system, and I wonder how it could reflect situations where the atmosphere around you is too hot for the character.
And the player status system is where you start to feel these environments, and the actual environments start to play into the gameplay. So you can see here that actually the physicalized wind, he's actually leaning into the wind, he's putting his hand up to try and shield himself, but he's not wearing the correct attire. So he's not wearing the correct equipment, because he's just basically grabbed.
The blizzard is finally the true in-game representation of weather that we've been waiting for since seeing what was probably a staged dust storm we saw in the Lear 3 demo at CitizenCon 2016. Eventually, our player made it out of the cold and found a suit stored in a cave which offered more protection from the elements.
So we better get a warm suit on, because otherwise we're going to essentially pass out and then die.
So this suit is actually cold, so hopefully when Glenn puts it on, you'll see actually that it's actually frosted, so you can see your actor's actually shivering here as he's putting it on.
During this sequence of putting the suit on, we could see how cold the player actually was at the time, from the feedback provided from the shivering hands and the facial expression. This suit showed off a bit more of the weather effects on the visor that we saw during the ship segment of the demo. While the effect is based on wind speed, temperature, precipitation, etc., I'm not sure if it was warm or humid enough for water droplets to be flying through the air. Maybe we could say the visor was warm enough to immediately melt the snow as it made contact with the visor. Regardless, the system definitely shows promise and is already very impressive. It is based on a 2-axis system that takes humidity and temperature into account to procedurally create weather effects planet-wide. It is a very impressive system that is explained in further detail in one of the other panels at the event. You can click through to that video through the pop-up in the corner.
With the armors, you will run into planets that are outside your temperature range. And so you might last there for 15 minutes, but obviously we want to make sure that it's very lucrative for you to be able to, go in there and risk reward gameplay for it.
After trudging through the snow for a little while, the player comes across a rover covered by a tarp. At this point, the player needs to pull the tarp off of the rover, showing us another implementation of the cloth tech on a larger scale. Something we saw quite a bit of talk about at CitizenCon 2018, last year. While it did look impressive, I would expect a non-weighted tarp to be more highly affected by the wind. Maybe it should have been tied down on 2 sides, I'm not sure. As always, I assume it will be polished further down the line. As we entered the rover, I actually thought it looked better than the rover's own cinematic trailer, which we saw a few years back. Kudos to CIG on that. We then took the rover for a ride through the blizzard, which decreases in ferocity as we descend into a valley, which is an intended effect of the weather system as you navigate through storms and poor weather. After catching some air in the rover, we got an amazing shot of the Karat flying overhead to pick us up. Beautifully staged. The rover entering the Karat reminded, I think, everybody of a similar attempt made at Gamescom 2017, when the rover couldn't even get up onto the ramp. Can I get a yay for improvements?
Good job, Glenn.
Yeah.
Once we were on the ship, we got to see once again the ability to remove armor without accessing the mobi-glass, which is much needed. We also got another look at some of the new UI elements, which we know they have been working on in conjunction with the building block system over the course of the past year, and is long overdue in the game. At this point, we got to see a little bit more of Deck 2 of the Karat, though it seemed to be the same bits that we saw in the beginning of the demo. And we then rushed down the ship's length to one of the Karat's turrets because Microtech security was on our tail. And while the aesthetics of the turret gameplay had me thinking of some exciting Star Wars turret battles, the reality was anything but. Turret gameplay is going to take a lot of work. Once the enemies were defeated, the Karat made its way into orbit while we admired the landscape. We then quantum jumped to a jump point. Here is where we finally got to see some of the spacescaping work they did with volumetric clouds surrounding the jump point. This made for a beautiful backdrop, and it was the first time we got to see this tech implemented into Star Citizen. The great thing about this technology is that at any point in those clouds, at any space in this little nebula-like area that we are inhabiting, you can get out of your ship, or stay in your ship for that matter. You can explore to your heart's content. They've been teasing this technology for quite some time, telling us about the different problems they had, like the inability for them to make it an enjoyable experience up close while still looking beautiful from far away. It is really nice to see that they've gotten past some of those issues and been able to get an implementation of the technology into the game. An interesting feature to note here are the space stations surrounding the jump point, which will allow you to get a hab right before or after making a jump, which will make it easy to log on and off in transit. Finally, we make our final approach to the jump point to see the first implementation of jump point navigation in-game. And while the gate itself didn't necessarily look exactly like the concept, because, well, what really does? The actual traversal of the wormhole looked surprisingly similar to the concept we saw back in 2015. After exiting the jump, we were in the Pyro system, which has been confirmed as the next system in the game due at some point in the next year or so, marking a great milestone for Star Citizen. And this is where the demo ends, and while I was really hoping Ruined Station would be visible from closer up, which can be seen in the distance, I can understand if they are going to save the Pyro system for CitizenCon next year, as that's when we would probably be seeing it enter the game. Overall, the keynote was fairly expected due to the leaks beforehand, but I think it showed in pretty good detail what we can expect from Star Citizen for the next year. And given that, I think the game is headed in a great direction with some solid additions being made. By the end of 2020, it seems that in terms of locations, AI, and gameplay, the alpha will be in a solid enough state to start focusing again on professions, which were delayed from the work in 2018. This hopefully will coincide roughly with the wrapping up of Squadron 42 in 2021. We hope. I'd like to thank everybody for joining your favorite tomato for this recap, and as always, check out my other videos for more information and pretty cinematics. Feel free to join my Discord channel in the description below to come play with me and chat about this game or any others on your mind. I'm Space Tomato, and I'll see you in the next one.